Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Free GRE Week with Kaplan. Y'all cannot keep leaving me hanging on that. I can't be the only one making a breath crowd noise. I hope you're doing it at home. Do not leave me hanging on. Hi. I missed y'all since yesterday. It's good to see you again. Shout out if you've been here for other lessons this week. Anybody? I know I see some of y'all have been here for all of them. Some of you just one. Hi, Brandon. Hey, Brian, Abby. Yes, Norma, thank you. I appreciate you not leaving me hanging on my crowd noise. Hi. Oh, my repeat customers. Hey. 4 for 4, that's a lot. Oh, good. I'm glad to see you. And I hope that you will continue coming, because even after tonight, we have a boot camp tomorrow. And is there anybody left who has yet to take a practice test? You have not taken a practice GRE or even a real GRE? Any non-GRE takers out there? Because the week doesn't necessarily have to end on Thursday. This weekend, we do also have a free practice test from Kaplan. We did one at the beginning of the free week, and we'll do one at the end. The only reason we're not doing Friday is because Friday is the unofficial Kaplan off day, and teachers don't come in on Friday. We don't teach on Friday. That's a no. So yeah, make like Norma. Come in and take your practice test on Saturday if you have not. Now, if you have taken the free practice test from Kaplan, we only have one. So don't come back. I mean, you can, but it's, returns are limited on that. But if you haven't taken one, make sure to do that. And those of you who know me will know that that is my number one top tip for students, is to take a practice test as early in your prep as possible, because you don't know how long you're going to need to prep. You don't know how many points you need. You don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are until you take a practice test. So if you're just studying willy-nilly without knowing any of that stuff, you're going to end up spending too much time or too little time studying, and you're going to end up studying the wrong things for you. And I don't want that to happen. So we're going to start with an overview of the GRE. We always start with an overview of the GRE because we inevitably have somebody who's brand new. Shout out, I know my repeat customers, but shout out if you're brand new today, like you just started GRE prep. This is your first little foray. Congrats if it is, because you found the world leader in GRE prep for your first day. So you're obviously doing your research and you're going to be very, very successful. Hi again, Jennifer. Hi. So we always want to start with an overview, because of course we have people who are new every single lesson. But I know that we have talked a little bit about these subjects all week long. Hey, Derica. Hi, Jasmine. Chelsea. I'm an MC. I'm not an MC, but if I were. Hi. So we always start with an overview, but I know a lot of you have seen this overview because we've done it throughout the week. So this time I'm going to go a little bit quicker, but I am going to stop on some of the pages where I think that you might have some questions and just see, and we'll treat this a little bit more like a Q&A session. You guys know that generally when you ask a question, it's going to go straight to your private tutor. That way you can feel free to ask me questions. It's totally free, no judgment zone. It's going to go straight to your private tutor. Unless you're in a situation like the beginning and end of class when I have asked you what specific questions you have, or anytime we ask you for specific questions while we're on camera. So the first thing we want to talk about is what the GRE covers. Of course, analytical writing, 2 scored sections of quantitative, 2 scored sections of verbal, and 1 experimental unscored section. I don't think we'll have too many questions about this, but I am expecting that we might have some questions about this. Are any of you still having any lingering questions about the scoring mechanism and how the multi-stage test works? I know that we talked about this a good bit earlier in the week, but you might not have been here for that conversation, or even if you were here, you might have come up with more questions. So I want to make sure that we all kind of understand not only how it's scored, but how that is going to play into the way that we prepare and the way that we take our test as well. We always want to make sure that we have a good understanding of the scoring, because it really does come into play in all of the things that you're going to do. Delaney, I can explain it one more time. So I do kind of know generally, Lauren, the highest scores for each section. So if you do really well on 2C, you're going to max out somewhere in like the low to mid 140s. I'll put that up here. Low to mid, or mid, yeah, low to mid 140s. Now that's not a perfect science, I know, but that's a good guesstimate. And if you do really well in section 2B, you can expect to be in the low to mid 150s. And then of course you can only get to a 170 if you get the hardest second section. Good timing start stats is the harder quant stuff, so you want to have it, right? Let's see, how hard is it to move up 9 points? You know what, Alana, it depends really on where you're at and which 9 points you're trying to get. If you are one of the people who's on the edge, like you're in the mid 140s or mid 150s, you could actually jump your score quite a bit, like fairly quickly, by, you know, just getting a couple more right answers in the first section. Now your essay, McKenna has a separate score. It's totally separate. So this, the multi-stage test, does not come into play with that. It's partially graded by human, partially graded by machine, which is why you don't get a score at the exact time that you finish taking your test. Logan, you know what? If you get into section 2A and do poorly, it's okay, because section 2A is weighted so much higher. So in section, if you get section 2B and do really well, you're going to get in the low to mid 150s. If you get section 2A and do really poorly, you're going to get in the low to mid 140s or 150s. So you're right there at the same place. So there's nothing really bad that can happen by getting into 2A, because you're going to, even if you don't know hardly how to answer anything, you're going to do really well. Like I had a student not that long ago, a coaching student of mine, and she took her first test. She got a 153. I don't remember if it's verbal or quant, but she got a 153. And then we studied and she worked like really hard. And then she took another practice test and she got a 153. And she was really kind of sad about this. So if this has happened to any of you and you're on that cusp score, you might be experiencing the same thing. So we wanted to see, like, why would that happen? I know that she's kicking butt on these subjects and topics, and I know she worked really hard these last couple of weeks. So why did we get the same score? So what we saw when we looked back at the test results was that the first 153, she had gotten into the medium second section, most of her, which is 2B, most of her questions were medium, and she had done really, really well. And she had gotten that 153, only missed a few questions. However, because she worked so hard and did so well in section 1 and missed less than she ever had, she had been put into section 2A. And now, because we had been working so much on those medium topics, she wasn't quite ready for all of those advanced topics. So she missed a lot of them, most of them, the vast majority of them. And so she got that same 153. However, now that we know we're in section 2A, now that we know we're solid on all of the question types that we're going to see in section 1, her and I start working on advanced material, and her very next practice test is a 158, and then it's a 162. So after that, it becomes very quick because we know what stuff to study. So Delaney, to your earlier question, the basics of this is that your first scored section, either quant or verbal, is going to have mostly medium questions. So you want to study the medium level topics. So advanced statistics, which we are studying tonight, might not be, it's great to get a preview, but until you're over a 158, it's not something that you want to spend a lot of your time on, because it's not something that's going to catapult you into the highest difficulty second section, because it's just not going to be tested at all or enough in the first section. So we want to study those medium level topics to get really, really solid on those, because if we do really, really well on the first section with the medium level topics, of course, the low level topics, and even if we get or miss the high, which will only be like 1 to 3, we're going to find ourselves in section 2A, which is weighted so much more heavily than the other sections that even if you do poorly, you're going to do better than if you did really well in the other sections. So that's what we always want. Our reward for doing really well is to get, much harder questions. So I'm going to move on past that, but are you able to see your performance per section? No, not per section, Jessica. You won't see it until the very end of the test. And, Derica, you're going to get your results immediately as soon as the test is over for everything but the writing portion. So you'll know, so you don't have to wait, but it's not by section. It's just going to be like the whole test. It just pops up on the screen and you'll know. And then you'll decide if you want to send it or not send it at that time. So we did talk about the average scores, 151 quant, 150 or 153 quant, 151 verbal. This is actually worldwide. And an interesting fact, at least I find it to be interesting, is that this is actually flipped in the United States. So worldwide, this is what you're going to have. But in the United States, it actually flips, with verbal average being 153 and the quant average being 151. The quant average worldwide has been going up over the years, and that is due largely to the fact that more people worldwide are taking the GRE, and math is a stronger outside of the US a lot of times. There's no penalty for guessing, Megan. That's a great question. So you always want to guess anything that you don't know the answer to. Just go ahead and guess, but make an educated guess. You know, like if one answer sticks out like a sore thumb, like if you have all integers and one of them is a decimal, I probably wouldn't guess the decimal. I mean, it's not a perfect science, but if I had to guess, I'm not going to guess the one that sticks out. Or if they're all fractions and they're all over 8, but one of them is over 3, then I'm probably not going to guess the one that's over 3. So anything that kind of sticks out is not going to be for me. All right, cool. So not too many questions then about average. Let's move on. So here's your scoring scale again. So this is going to go back to your what to study and how to move around, which is tonight's study tips topic. So it's going to be about how to move around your section in order to make the most of it, which is, just hugely important in section 1, because your max score is pretty much determined by your performance in section 1. So you need to make sure that you squeeze out every last question that you are capable of answering right. So we're going to talk about how to move around the section in study tips tonight. It's one of my favorite tricks to test taking that I'm going to pass on today. So when you look at these scores right around here between the 50th and 60th percentile, that's where you're kind of at the edge between section 2B, section 2A. So you're either in section 2A and really missing a lot of them, or you're in section 2B and really getting a lot of them. Either way, tightening up on those medium difficulty topics is going to get you either up above a 158, which is when you know to start testing advanced materials, or it's going to get you into that highest second section so that then you can move towards that 158. The same with right here between the 20th and 30th percentile, or maybe right around the 20th percentile. That's the same too. You're in between section 2A and 2B. So you could definitely catapult yourself by making sure that you just squeeze every single right answer. And I know that we're all trying to get as many right answers. So if you're sitting there like, but Coach Allie, I've always been trying to get right answers. Like I never wasn't trying to get right answers. I totally understand that, but getting right answers is going to mean playing to your strengths. So that's why we're going to talk about today how to move around the section so that we can target your strengths and make sure that those get done. Like, have you ever done like a speed bump question? I call it a speed bump question. It's where you get a question and you spend way too much time on it, and maybe you get it right, maybe you don't, but it's like really hard for you. And then later you end up having to rush on something that when you review later, you totally would have got it right, but because you were rushing, you didn't get it right. Has that ever happened to you? That's a time management issue too. So these speed bump questions, I mean, I never ask you to admit something that hasn't actually happened to me or happened to me many, many times. So we want to make sure that we are missing or that we are skipping over any of our speed bump questions, that we're targeting the things that are easiest and quickest for us first. And so that's really going to come down to using the mark and review features, skipping around the section. So that's what we're really going to talk about today, because again, just squeezing out one more right answer could really make a huge difference in your score. So we want to make sure that we're thinking about that all throughout the test. Let's see. And we had here our averages by intended area of study. So this information is all available on the ETS website. Like this is actually from the ETS website, or the data is. However, right now it's just time to practice GRE. Do not take the time to go digging through ETS data. I mean, if you love that kind of stuff like I do, you can do it later, but right now it's all about, practice questions. Right. You got to skip it. Skip your speed bump questions, Joseph. We don't want to do them. So always, 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 I want you looking out for the same things in lesson. We're going to talk about strategies, of course. Today's lesson is an advanced lesson. So like I said, if your score is not above a 158, this is not something that I would put all of my time or even a large amount of my time into right now. I would be working more on those medium level topics, but it's a great thing to get a preview of. It's a great thing to take some notes so that when you are ready to dig in, you have the information that teacher Boris is going to pass on tonight. If you are above a 158, then these more advanced topics in quant are the ones that you need to really start moving into now. But in terms of strategies, can you guys tell me any strategies that you've learned this week? This will be especially helpful for our newbies. They can kind of try and take notes from y'all right quick. What have we learned to do this week in terms of strategy? Because I feel like everything that we've talked about has been strategic for the most part. Some of my favorite strategies have been talked about. Back solving, Leah, absolutely. This is when you use your answer choices to help you to turn algebra into arithmetic. So you just use one of the answer choices, plug it in as the total. Read the entire question, Carlos. Absolutely. Don't skip around. The question is where they try and trap you a lot of times. Word roots, how to use your paper. Oh, I'm glad that you like that, Marie. That's actually, it makes it so much easier to stay organized. I'm a naturally disorganized person, so that was a huge tip for me. Make sure you're answering the question that's asked. And what are you going to do every time that you are checking your work and you find that you answered the wrong question? What are you going to do that's going to fix that for yourself? Back solving helps us also understand the roots of vocab. Absolutely. Absolutely. So we can also go, back solving helps and also understand the roots of vocab. Yes, absolutely. Roots are going to be really helpful. Answering the actual question, making your verbal notebook. Yeah. I think just tracking right and wrong things is going to be really helpful just generally. Think like a thesaurus, not like a dictionary. I love that. I actually made that slide. So I really like that you like that. Yeah, an error log. You know what, Denise, I've never, I don't make my tutoring students keep like a separate error log, although you can, and I've known students to be very successful with that. But I'm not, that's right, Andrea, but I'm not super good at doing that because like I said, I'm a naturally disorganized person. So I just feel like as long as you write down why you got it wrong, writing it down will make it stick in your memory, and eventually you'll get super tired of writing it down. So you'll know. Oh, Alex, I love it. Yes. Use your GRE words. We're going to be a thesaurus. I love it. Slashes. That's perfect, Kyle. You know what? I had never actually seen that trick before with the slashes. I had always written A, B, C, D, E. And, I just thought that time was worth it. And I'm going to actually put it on screen now for those of you who were not here for that particular lesson. But teacher Jed told us that on our paper, we're going to, instead of writing A, B, C, D, E, in order to keep track of what we're eliminating, we're just going to put 5 slashes. And then if we're like, well, it's definitely not A and it's definitely not C, then we can just slash it out. Isn't that so cool for those of y'all who weren't here? I never had done that actually. So that's actually a brand new one on me. So yeah, that's a good one. Awesome. I'm glad you've been learning your strategies. We're going to also work always on time management. So you need to know too that sometimes if you see a question and you don't know how to do it, just skip it. You can come back later. But it's always about staying ahead of the clock without getting careless. At a certain point, whatever strategy you're using can only go so fast. So if you need to go faster, then you need to switch strategies, which means that the biggest part of time management is having more than one strategy for any given question in your back pocket. So you want to make sure. Oh, Valerie, it's okay. So when you're doing a question, you know how it's on screen and it's like A, B, C, D, E, and you think through, oh, I don't want A, or I know that C is not right. But because you can't write that because it's on the computer screen, you kind of have to keep thinking through that of why did I get rid of that? Or did I eliminate that? And you're just rereading it again. So what you can do is I used to write A, B, C, D, E on my paper and just cross out whichever ones or write my little notes. But teacher Jed taught us the other day, and you can see it on the bottom of my screen, he taught us to just make 5 slashes on our paper so that when we're looking on the screen and we're like, okay, I know it's definitely not A, we can just easily turn that slash into an X. I don't like A, right? And then when you're looking at C and you're like, well, I don't know about B, so I'm going to retain it. C is definitely out. I'll retain D as well. E is definitely out. So you could just easily turn that slash into an X. Like I said, I always wrote A, B, C, D, and E, and then slashed out whichever ones and kept track of my thinking. But I thought that slashing was pretty cool because it's way quicker than writing A, B, C, D, and E, and then you could just easily turn it into an X. Karina, how many given pieces of papers are you going to get? It depends on the place. Sometimes they'll give you 6, sometimes they'll give you 3, but that's why working with your paper can be really important. You want to make sure that you are really judicious and really keep very organized, because when you raise your hand for new paper, they will bring you new paper, but they're going to take your old paper. So you're not going to be able to go back and check your work because your work will be taken from you, which is why you kind of want to make the most of whatever paper they give you. Okay, so Alana got 4. Alexandra, I mean, maybe. So, we talked about how to use your paper the other day and how to, kind of turn it into quadrants instead of just writing all over it. So in your little quadrant, when you do a question, you can put your little slash marks, you know, and yeah, you could do that. I might do something like this. I got a question here. You could have like your math over here. And then if you have time to go back and check that work, you can be like, oh, you know what? I also like D. Let me go back and check my math. Oh, you know what? Actually, that math is wrong. And it was D. I'm going to go back for that. So yeah, you definitely can put a lot of different things. Yeah, but I would do it. I would put slashes because when you, or A, B, C, D, E, whatever, because when you, Howard's just going to write on the computer screen. But when you're looking at this screen, it doesn't seem like a paper-based test, right? Because on a paper-based test, don't you slash stuff out that you've already eliminated? Don't you circle questions to come back to later because like, you know, they're hard, or like if you have enough time, you just want to review that one? Because I always did. I always left notes on questions, or sometimes you just skip questions to see if a later question would help you answer the earlier question. So these are all things that we have always done on our tests because our tests are paper-based. These are test taking skills that you do have. However, because it's on the computer, we tend to think that we can no longer use those test taking skills, but you can continue to use those test taking skills. You just have to kind of improvise and help your paper or use your paper to make it more like a paper-based test for you. So either writing out A, B, C, D, and E so that you can keep track of your notes on each of the answer choices, or the slash method. Also sticking really organized so you can go back and check your work whenever you want. And using those mark and review features to move around the section. Those are all things that you've probably done with tests for a really long time. And you can continue to do that even though this is a computer-based test. So yeah, Alana, definitely. Whenever you want new paper, you just raise your hand and they'll bring you some. The only issue is that when you ask for more paper, they take your existing paper. So you're not going to be able to go back and check your work anymore, which is why it is kind of better to be as judicious with your paper as possible, because ideally you would want time to go back and check your work. And you can't do that if you can't see it. So that's one of the things. The other thing is focus practice. So in today's lesson, you can feel free to ask any questions that you want throughout this statistics lesson. And why is that? Why can we feel just so safe and comfortable asking questions? We don't have to be feeling embarrassed. We don't have to worry about like, is it a good question to ask or is it silly? We don't have to worry about sharing our own information. Like, I'm loud and proud. I'll say I had a 141 quant. That doesn't bother me none. It was the 8th percentile. Now it's the 10th percentile. So I know I sound a little bit more fancy when I say it now. But I went to 167, so it doesn't bother me. But why would you feel like totally safe to share any personal information about your scores so far, to ask any questions, and it's totally safe space? Absolutely. No question is a bad question. We're all learning. And yeah, Alex, we're going to always, your questions are going to go directly to your private tutor. So each and every one of you has been assigned a private tutor to help you throughout class tonight. So feel free to ask any of those questions. Feel free to talk about what score you're at, what score you want to get to, what your journey has been, if you've retaken it and you need advice now. Anything that you need to ask, send them through, because we have a whole bunch of private tutors that are happy to ask them. And like I said, it's a totally safe space because it's going to go right to your private tutor. So I hope you take advantage of that. And I hope that you just continue to take advantage of all of the pieces of everything that we're doing, because tonight you have your own private coach. Well, kind of private. I'm coaching the whole room. You have your own teacher, one of the best in the business, and you have your own private tutor. So it's a lot more than just a lesson that you're watching. It's a whole interactive experience. So I'm going to pass you off now to one of my very favorite teachers, Teacher Boris, who's really good at statistics. So I hope that you enjoy his lesson on advanced statistics, and I will see you soon.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for coming to this free event. Thank you also to my friend and fellow GRE teacher, Allie, for that wonderful introduction. I'm so excited to see you here. Let me know in the chat, how are you feeling? I'm not going to ask too many questions like that because I know that we've got some amazing moderators behind the scenes checking all the chats that you've got coming through, but I do just want to check in with you, make sure that, you know, people can see me and hear me and that no one's laptop has imploded since my face first appeared upon it. Excellent. Looks like people are doing great. Brandon, hello. Billsy, welcome aboard. Connor giving us some greetings. That is fantastic. So thank you guys very much for coming. Now, I want to reiterate something that Allie mentioned, which I thought was really cool. I actually had not heard of this terminology before. Allie called some questions speed bump questions. These are questions that you spend way too much time on, and whether you get them right or wrong, they end up not being worth the time that you spent on them, because then you don't have time to answer other questions. I'm going to be honest, in this lesson, which is advanced statistics, pretty much every single question that we cover is going to be, for many people, a speed bump question. So you might find that like nothing makes sense this lesson. You might find that like absolutely none of it makes a single dent in your brain, and that is totally fine. When we say advanced statistics, we're not kidding around. We're talking like 160 plus difficulty questions. So if you are in the 140s in quant, if you are in the low 150s in quant, like, yeah, this stuff's not going to make any sense because it's not supposed to. Don't beat yourself up about it. Practice the things that are in your score range, and then once you get skilled at those medium and low difficulty questions, then you'll be able to come back to these and you'll have the foundations for these to make sense. Contrarily, if any of the questions tonight make sense, like if you understand a single one of these questions this hour, then give yourself mad props, because these are some of the hardest questions that you're ever possibly conceivably going to see on the GRE. There pretty much is not harder math content tested on this whole exam. So that's why we put it into this free week. We really wanted to give people a taste of some of the most challenging content that there is, and also how at Kaplan we teach it. So I hope that you're excited for a wild ride. We're going to review several quite challenging topics in this hour. We're going to review standard deviation. We're going to review continuous frequency distributions, and finally, normal distributions. Even the names of this stuff is kind of scary. And again, don't let it get to your head. If you have a hard time with this material, don't be like, oh my God, I'm stupid, I'm gonna fail the GRE now. Not true. These are some of the highest points that you might reach for on your test. If you can get any of them now, well, then that's just fantastic. Okay, so folks, let's go ahead and begin with our first topic, which is standard deviation. And let me know in the chat real quick, have you ever had to calculate in the statistics class standard deviation? Like, is this something that you have experience with? Have you ever used that like 5-step formula for calculating this concept? A lot of people have taken stats at some point in college. Something like Lauren's done it, Nicolina's done it. A few of you have not done it, like Jacqueline hasn't done it, and that's totally fine. So if you have done it, then you know that this is a very, very painful process. Perhaps you're like Brianna and you're wondering like, man, I haven't done it in a few years, so I'm feeling a little bit nervous about it. It's a pretty scary thing. You have to find the average of the data, that's step one. Then you have to find the difference between the average and every value in the list. That's step two. There's still 3 steps to go. Then you have to square those differences, find the average of the squares of the differences. Then you're still not done, because you got to take the square root of that average, and yay, you did it. You found standard deviation. Now, the reason I'm going through that kind of fast is that you don't actually need to calculate standard deviation on the GRE. If you want to feel more comfortable, certainly you can take a screenshot or take a picture of the screen with your phone and study this formula later, or Google standard deviation and look up the formula and learn how to do it. But the really important thing on the test is strategy. The GRE is not particularly interested in making you grind through a whole bunch of like really, really painful math. What the GRE is interested in is your ability to think critically. So the GRE is going to ask you critical thinking questions, and standard deviation is good for that because it's a very conceptual idea. So standard deviation, if we ignore all these steps and think about what it actually means, is a measure of how far apart the numbers of a list are. So in this case, for example, let's say my numbers are 8, 8, 8, 8, and how about 8 for the last one? Let me know in the chat, what would you guess, just conceptually, is the standard deviation? See, in this case, all of the numbers are exactly the same, which means that there is no distance between any of the numbers. So Darren's right, Liz is right, I see Plu's correct. A lot of you guys are coming in with some zeros. Yes, in this case, the standard deviation is just equal to 0. So that's your first concept about standard deviation. The smallest standard deviation ever can be is 0, because standard deviation is a measure of distance, and distance can't be negative. Now, the more that you spread the numbers out in a list, the bigger the standard deviation is going to get. What that means is that a list of numbers like 1, 2, 3 is going to have a smaller standard deviation than a list of numbers like 1, 1,000, and 1,000,000. That is going to have a much bigger standard deviation because the numbers are much farther apart from each other. So whenever you see standard deviation on the GRE, don't necessarily think to yourself, oh no, I'm going to fail the GRE now because I forgot how to do that formula from 17 years ago when I took a stats class. Instead, think, okay, conceptually, standard deviation reflects the distance between the numbers. How far apart are the numbers from each other? And now how can I use that knowledge in order to progress on this question? Let's do a question together, and you can see how this will work. If you'd like to, at any point, please feel free to vote on the poll provided by the amazing off-camera teacher, Stuart, who will be my poll master tonight and letting me know the results from all the polls that you have up. This is partly to prevent the chat from being spoilers, and also partly to prevent, 567 people all typing, B into the chat or something like that, just to make it a little bit easier on our moderators. And we can also that we see, of course, how the class is doing. So high intimidation factor question right here. We have quantity A, standard deviation of with variables, and quantity B, standard deviation of the somewhat different variables. It's very important that you do not let a question like this get under your skin. In fact, let me know in the chat, do you ever feel like you're intimidated by a question on the GRE before you even start to do it? You ever have that happen where you just look at it and the million X's on the screen just bombard your face all at the same time, and you kind of feel intimidated, your gut clenches up a little bit, start to get sweaty, start to get a little bit clammy. Okay, I see I've hit a nerve here. So I see Oriella saying 100%, Michael saying, oh, definitely. Okay, so this is the thing that happens. But it's what the GRE wants to happen, isn't it? It's what the test makers want. The test makers want to write questions that aren't that hard, but that intimidate you. Good rule of thumb, don't do what the GRE test makers want you to do. If they want you to be intimidated, then don't be intimidated. Look at the question and say, look, either I can do it or I can't. If I can do it, there's no point in panicking. I should just do it. If I can't do it, Coach Ali has just taught us what we'll do. Don't let that question be a speed bump, skip it. So whether you do it or whether you skip it, it should not really have any major impact on your test. If it's not going to have any impact on your test, then there's no reason to be worried. There's no reason to panic. Developing that mindset through practice can make you feel a lot more confident on test day and help cure test anxiety that might have been dogging you throughout your GRE prep up till now. So here, we're not going to worry about how many letters there are. We're just going to take a deep breath and say, okay, standard deviation measures how far apart numbers are from each other. So let me know in the chat, folks, if you'd be so kind, please. How far apart would you say are the numbers in quantity A? Like if we look at x versus x plus 1, x plus 1 versus x plus 2, x plus 2 versus x plus 3, x plus 3 versus x plus 4. How far apart are the numbers in this list that we're looking at? I don't know what x is. And if you wanted to, you could pick some numbers, which is another strategy that you might have seen at Kaplan. But you can tell, perhaps just algebraically, that exactly, Vanessa. Very nice, Amanda. I saw Jaslyn mention this earlier. Yeah, these are all a distance of 1 apart, right? There's like a distance of 1 between all these numbers. Okay, fine. That doesn't tell me the answer, though, because I have to compare this to quantity B. So if you'd be so kind, ladies and gentlemen, let me know in the chat, how far apart are the numbers in quantity B? So these are different. These are x minus 2 and x minus 1, x minus 1 and x and x plus 1, x plus 1 and x plus 2. Perhaps a light bulb has just gone off in your head like, oh, it's just the GRE test makers being obnoxious. It's a smoke and mirror show. The magician's waving his or her hands over here while moving the ball over here. Yeah, these look different, but at the same time, it's just a difference of 1, right? Although these are different looking x's, it's still just a difference of 1. So I'm sitting in the poll now. What's going on? First, Stuart was telling me that A and C were split vote, but before I even said anything at all about the answer, C started pulling way ahead, and now about 3/4 of you are looking at this choice and you want to pick it. And that is indeed the correct answer. Let's go ahead and grab choice C for champions, because clearly the difference between the numbers in the list, the distances between the numbers, are the same. That is how the GRE will test standard deviation, not by making you grind out 15 gajillion steps in some archaic formula, but by testing your critical thinking and creative problem solving skills. And at the end of the day, it doesn't actually take that long to do this question. This is a classic GRE question. Hard, but does not take that long to do. All right, folks, very nice work on that problem. Thank you for working on that question with me. Let's move on to, let me actually move on to our next question here. So we've just reviewed standard deviation, and now we're going to move on to our next question. This one, I'm going to let you try entirely on your own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a timer on my computer for 1.5 minutes. And I'm going to let Stuart open the poll for this next question. Stuart, as always, will be an amazing poll master. Folks, once you've had 90 seconds to work on this question, or at any point that you finish early, please feel free to vote for the choice that you would pick on test day. When 90 seconds are up, we're going to review this thing like there ain't nothing to this thing. I'll see you in 1.5 minutes. Good luck and enjoy the practice. All right, if you finished, excellent. If you didn't finish, don't worry about it. This is right here a close to 170 level GRE math question. Like I said, we're not kidding around. We call this the advanced stats session, and we really just brought the advanced A game on this one. Let's figure out what's going on. We have a list of numbers, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 15. That's list R. Then what happens is we actually get a new number that joins the party. One more 8 is added, and that becomes list S. In this problem, your challenge was to compare the standard deviation of R to the standard deviation of S. And one way to do it, of course, is to find the standard deviation of R using the awful standard deviation formula, and then find the standard deviation of S using the standard deviation formula, which is still awful, and then compare the numbers and get the answer. That's what the GRE wants you to do. The GRE comes up to you and is like, hey, want to do the standard deviation formula a couple of times? And we know that when the test makers offer us something on a silver platter, that's probably not the way that we're supposed to do the question for real. So here is another approach to beating this question. One thing that we can do is say, okay, let's find the average of our list. Let's take our current list, R, and figure out what the average is. So let me know in the chat, folks, what is the average of list R before we add new numbers to it? What do we get as our average? Well, remember the formula for the average, right? Average is sum of values divided by number of values. In this case, the sum of the values is 4 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 15, which is a cool 40. And when you take 40 and divide by the number of numbers, which is 5, you get that the average is actually 8. It is exactly 8. And 8 is a very interesting number, of course, because 8 is the number that is added. The number that we add is exactly equal to the number that is currently the average of the list. Now, you have to ask yourself then, what will be the effect of adding another number to the list that is right smack dab in the middle of the list? You think that's going to pull the numbers closer together and reduce the distances between the numbers? Or is that going to spread the numbers farther apart and increase the distance between the numbers? You can kind of think of the average of a list of numbers as being its center of gravity, like its core. When you add another number to the core, it increases the mass in the middle and it pulls the numbers closer together. When there's another number that is exactly equal to the average, that reduces the distance between the numbers in the list and the average. Imagine the opposite. Imagine if I added some number like a billion to the list, right? Clearly, if I added a billion, that would make the standard deviation go way up. But because I added a number that is right in the center of the list, that will make the standard deviation go down. So compared to the standard deviation of list R, the standard deviation of S has gone down because the new number that was added is right in the middle. You have to be very careful at this point, though, because if the standard deviation of list S has gone down, it means that the standard deviation of list R is actually bigger. And so the answer here is a choice that was the minority in the poll. It was choice A for awesome, or tonight, choice A for our amazing coach, Allie. So you're going to click that choice, confirm it, and move on with the GRE. Now, the most popular choices in the poll were B and D, which is just a demonstration of how difficult this question is. So again, remember that if there's a question tonight you get wrong, good. Your attitude should be that if I make a mistake now, thank goodness. Better to make it now than to make it on test day. And in this particular case, if you do understand it after review, well, who cares if you didn't understand it before review? The GRE doesn't care if you get something on your own or if you need help to understand it in practice. The GRE is not going to call up, Harvard and be like, hey, yeah, so I see that Gabrielle's applying to your program and she did get a 167, but you should have seen what she was doing back at the Kaplan event. Like, no one's going to know. No one's going to care. All that matters is that you get it on test day and you can pick up a really good point. Now, there was a great question from Gabrielle, which is why her name wasn't on the tip of my tongue. Gabrielle was wondering, why would our first reaction be to find the average? How do we know that? Great question. Because the standard deviation is a measure of how far apart the numbers are from each other. And when you take the average of all the numbers, that gives you a ballpark of what the numbers are balanced around. So the numbers, because their average is 8, it means that they're balanced around the number 8. Like if you put them on opposite sides of a seesaw, if the number in the middle of that seesaw was 8, it would be totally balanced. So putting another 8 onto the list would put it right smack dab in the middle of the numbers. There is another more technical way, which is that in the standard deviation formula, you start by finding the average, and then you find the distance between the average and every number in the list. So adding another number that is equal to the average would add another 0 to your calculations, which would make the ultimate average in the end smaller. So that's one case where if you do know the standard deviation formula, you could, if you wanted to be technical about it, use that to make some conclusions on this question. Okay, folks, great work. Now let's go ahead and take a look at our next topic, which is continuous frequency distributions. A frequency distribution tells you how many times a particular data point appears in the data. So in this frequency distribution that is just given here as an example, the number 2 appears about 30 times, the number 3 appears about 45 times, the number 4 appears 35 times, and so on. It's a different way of expressing information. Instead of listing out all 32s and all 45 3s and all 35 4s, we can express the same information much more succinctly by using a frequency distribution. Now, these can get very complicated if you take a stats class, but as you know, the GRE is not particularly interested in giving you grinding, difficult problems to solve. The GRE is much more interested in asking conceptual questions about frequency distributions. So I'd like to work through one together with you so that you can see the sorts of things that GRE might ask. This question refers to the continuous frequency distribution above. You might actually already know the answer, and if you do, feel free to vote in Pollmaster Stewart's poll and let us know what you think. But if you don't know, it's okay. I'm going to lead you on this wild ride, and as long as you hold my hand and buckle your seatbelt, maybe hold onto your hat with your toes, you will get there in the end and you'll be fine. We have to compare the median of the frequency distribution with the mean or the average of the distribution. So let's think about this frequency distribution. It is clearly tilted to the left. So one question that we could ask ourselves is, what would it be? What would our answer be if it wasn't tilted to the left? What would it be if it was just like a perfectly symmetrical curve, such as the one I have drawn, which is absolutely blinding in its perfect symmetry? Let me know in the chat, folks, what do you think? If the GRE had given you a completely symmetrical perfect curve, then what would you say is the answer to this question? How does the mean compare to the median? Well, yeah, it would seem that if we say that there's a completely perfect curve, then the middle of the data would be right there, and the mean would be right there as well. Everything would balance around that middle value. So now we have to ask ourselves, what happens when you tilt everything to the left? Clearly, we're not going to get the same result. So it cannot possibly be choice C. They cannot possibly be equal. And it also cannot possibly be choice D. And by the way, cyber high five, I see that a lot of you are voting for A and B. Those two choices are locked in a bit of a contest right now. And the thing is that you guys agreed that it was not D, because there has to be some kind of relationship. It must be possible to figure it out because the data is so clear that there's much more frequency on the left than on the right. So there is some relationship. Maybe I can't figure it out. But if I'm guessing, I'm not going to guess choice D. So now we have to decide whether the median is bigger than the mean. Here's what you have to understand about continuous frequency distributions. The median is always going to be where you see your bump. Roughly speaking, the median is going to be there. The reason for that is that the y-axis is the number of times that something appears. Yes, there are values over here, but there's not that many of them. There's not that many of each one. The vast majority of the values are going to be around here. So the middle number is going to be somewhere near the hump. But the average is going to be pulled to the right because you've got these big numbers over on the right-hand side that are pulling the average and making it bigger. It's kind of like if you've ever seen misleading statistics in the news, which say like the average salary is blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, but when there's like one person who's a billionaire, that's going to pull the average salary way up, even if everybody else is not very wealthy at all. When you're looking at salaries, that's why you always want to look at median salary, not average salary, the salary of the people in the middle, not the average, which includes some outliers that can be very, very large and pull the average up. So that is why in this case, we need to pick my personal favorite GRE answer choice of all time, and that is choice B for Boris. The average gets pulled forward when you skew the data to the left, but the median stays the same. And if you remember one thing from this question, it's that the median in a normal frequency distribution is always in the hump, but the average gets pulled by where you have the tail. And so that is how we can make a distinction. And I know it can be difficult, but I want you to look for opportunities in your practice where you can learn something difficult once. Like, yeah, it might be kind of hard to understand it, really just wrap your mind around it. But once you just know this fact, you know it for life. So if the GRE were to ask you another question, which the test makers very easily could, the test makers could very easily, for example, ask you a question about the opposite scenario, where the curve is on the right, then the small numbers on the left would pull the average down and the median would be bigger, right? So you can get several different types of questions on this. And then you don't have to figure it out anymore because you already worked hard to figure it out the one time and now you know it. Don't beat yourself up for how hard it is for you to learn something. Celebrate to yourself the fact that you did learn something because it is going to score you points on test day. Okay, now we did that one together. So you know what that means. That means that it's time for you to try one entirely on your own. I'm going to bring up a timer on my computer again for 1.5 minutes. And folks, I'm going to give you 90 seconds to try this question, voting in Pollmaster Stu's amazing 5-answer multiple choice poll. Give it your best shot. If you get it wrong, good. Celebrate. Celebrate getting it wrong now with me and Allie and Stuart and all of our amazing off-camera teachers, and not on test day, which is when your competition is going to get it wrong. I'll see you in 90 seconds to review. Good luck. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's review this question. Looks like a lot of us are thinking it's either choice B or choice C or choice D. So let's see if one of those choices was the right one or if some crazy underdog managed to steal the show. One thing that you should know if you haven't learned it before as a part of general strategy, so like even if you're drowning with all this advanced stat stuff, this is something you can take with you to the bank all the way on quant day. Read the answer choices on quant problems. Read them because they give you information. One thing I used to do is get really afraid when the answer choices were these like long sentences. And by the time I finished my prep, these were my favorite choices because you know what you should think? When the answer choices are long, that means you have a lot of information on the choices. You have a greater opportunity to use process of elimination to get to the answer without having to do all the work. Oh, by the way, I totally misread Stewart's poll results. E is actually the winning choice, and then B, C, D are bringing up the rear. So our majority choice is E. Our runner-ups are B, C, and D. Let's find out who won. So first things first, we see that there's choices saying least mean and greatest mean. Least mean and greatest mean. So right off the bat, I should be like, well, which one has the greatest mean and which one has the least mean? Because that might let me lop off some answer choices. So let me know in the chat, folks. What here had the biggest mean? What here had the smallest mean? All of these are nice symmetrical curves. So perfect, it is as if I drew them. And when you have a perfectly shaped curve, the mean, the average is going to be right in the middle. So for C, the mean is over here. For B, it's somewhere around here. And for A, it's all the way over here. That means that A earns the title of L for least mean, and then C earns the title of G for greatest mean. And we can lop off some answer choices accordingly. So choice B says that B has the greatest mean, and that's just totally false. B is actually right in the middle. And choice D can go away for similar reasons. It says that C has the smallest average, but that ain't true because C actually had the biggest average. So choice D is gone. Now, the remaining choices, A, C, and E, all correctly say who is the smallest average, who is the biggest one. So, okay, we're going to have to look at standard deviation. Which one had the greatest standard deviation? Which one had the smallest standard deviation? Now, let me know in the chat, folks, which curve here do you think had the greatest standard deviation? You don't need to calculate anything. Nice work, folks. The greatest standard deviation is going to be with the curve that has the biggest difference among its numbers. And choice B is just like Jabba the Hutting all over this graph, like blomp. The numbers are all over the place. So that one's got the biggest standard deviation. And for that reason, we can actually eliminate choice C, because choice C says that something other than B has the greatest standard deviation, which is not true. It was definitely B's title to take. Now, the smallest standard deviation is going to be choice C because C is the tightest one. So these are the numbers that have the farthest or that have the least amount of distance from each other. So C will be the smallest, and that eliminates choice A. A for awesome, alas, was A for so close, because A claims that A had the smallest standard deviation, but it was actually in the middle for choice A. So for that reason, we're going to go ahead and pick choice E, which was the majority winner in the poll. Choice E correctly points out that C has the biggest average because it's farthest to the right on the graph and the smallest standard deviation because the numbers are closest together. So if you got it right, congrats. You can do at least one super advanced stats question on test day. All right, now folks, you've done an amazing job here. Thank you so much for asking your great questions, for working with me on these problems, and heck, for getting some of them right, which is amazing. We're about to do a really difficult topic. This next topic, there's no bones about it, folks. It is a hard topic. This might be a moment where you go, okay. And you know what? That's going to happen in your practice. There's going to be times where you feel like something just absolutely does not make any sense whatsoever. And that's fine. The key is don't let one bad topic ruin your test. Just because something doesn't make sense does not mean that you are going to get a bad GRE score. At most, all it can possibly mean is that you are going to skip those questions on test day. You are not going to let those questions be roadblocks or speed bumps to you getting a good score. Just saying that in case what I'm about to say makes no sense whatsoever, let this be one of those things that you drop and pick up later. But if even one question of the ones we're about to do makes sense, you got to give yourself a massive self high five. And I'll be right here to give you a cyber high five if you want, because man, if you can get these questions right, there is nothing you can't do on test day. So it turns out if you do some crazy math that you definitely don't need to know on test day. A lot of numbers, when you have a normal distribution, a perfectly shaped curve, a lot of numbers are within one standard deviation of the average. Now, I'm going to pause because I know I just spat out a bunch of horrible sounding math verb garbage. The average is right in the middle. One standard deviation, if you were to follow that formula and calculate it, if you add that to the average, that's one standard deviation above it. If you subtract that from the average, that's one standard deviation below it. And it turns out that most numbers on a perfectly shaped curve, about 2/3 of them actually, a little more, are going to be within one standard deviation. If you go to within 2 standard deviations of the average, you're going to get an overwhelming majority of all the numbers in the curve. About 95% of all the numbers in the curve will be within 2 standard deviations of the middle. And that may seem like a really, I don't know, bizarrely specific fact to just memorize going into the GRE. But I encourage you to memorize it. I encourage you to learn this fact because it does show up on questions sometimes, and we will see a practice question tonight that actually uses this fairly obscure and bizarrely specific factoid that about 2/3 of the values in a normal distribution are one standard deviation away from the average or less, and about 95% of all the values in a list are about 2 standard deviations away or less. So let's take a look at some questions that work with this skill of counting by standard deviations. We'll do one together. And as always, I am going to give you one to try entirely on your own. The variable b is normally distributed if 71 is 2 standard deviations above the mean and 29 is 1 standard deviation below the mean. What is the mean of this distribution of v? Okay, now I know a lot of people on test day are going to just look at this. Just head explodes. Well, what is all this terminology? So how on earth do you get started here? What you do is you draw a number line, okay? A regular old number line, right? It's -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Number line, right? You've done this in grade school. It's a piece of cake. The only catch is that on this number line, instead of every tick mark being like the literal number 1, it's how many standard deviations away are you from the average? So the average is at 0 standard deviations away from the average. And then every other number is going to be 1, 2, 3, or more standard deviations away from the average. It's a bit kooky, but this is what you should do. Draw a number line and count by standard deviations. Now let me know in the chat, folks, if I read my information in the question very, very carefully, where will I write the number 71? Where's the number 71 going to go? Because I saw Sarah in the chat. Sarah's head just exploded. I'm going to do my best to pick up all little bits of your cranium, Sarah, and put them back together. Because there is a way to get this one done. And amazingly, it's not even that bad. You might think it's not even that bad when we're done. Yeah, okay, 2. We're going to put it at the number 2. Why? Well, because it says that 71 is 2 standard deviations above the mean, right? So we just look at this crazy little number line. And at 2 above the mean, we put a 71. Following a similar logic, we're going to write 29 at the -1 because it is 1 standard deviation below the mean. Now, here's my question to you. How many standard deviations apart are these numbers? 71 and 29. Well, just looking at this seemingly simplistic number line, I can tell that they are 3 standard deviations apart. Very nice, Michael. Very nice, Jessica. Thank you guys, just above all else, for sticking with me. I know this is crazy. I know our moderators are getting tons of chats of like, oh my God, I'm so confused. This is the worst thing ever. I know that this is a really scary, very, very difficult topic, but I see that you guys are sticking with it. You're giving it your best shot and you're doing this thing, which is all I could possibly ever ask for. But yeah, it's 3. They're 3 spaces apart. So what we're going to do is we're going to say that 71 minus 29 is 3 standard deviations. And here you can do actual arithmetic. 71 minus 29 is 42. So, logic question, if 42 is 3 standard deviations, then what's 1 standard deviation? Well, if 3 of them is 42, it only stands to reason that 1 of them would be a third of 42. Exactly, Kirsten, it would be 14. So we say that 1 standard deviation is 14, a third of 42, which is choice A, but of course choice A is a trap. I was so happy. You cannot possibly imagine my absolute radiant joy when Ali asked, what strategies have you learned this week? And the number of people put actually answering the question. Yes, that's a very, very good strategy. Always before you bubble in a choice, before you click it, confirm it, and move on, you ask yourself, am I done? And the answer here is no, because what we found is 1 standard deviation, but the test makers did not ask what is 1 standard deviation. They asked what is the average. Well, at this point, we can look at the average. It's at 0, which is 1 standard deviation above 29. So you add 14, 1 standard deviation to 29, and that's 43. That is the answer. So you click choice D for domination, D for dang, you just got a 167 plus level question right, and move on with the test. Is this question hard? Yes, it is very hard. This is a crazy hard question, but it doesn't actually take that long to do. And what's weird about it is the math isn't even complicated. You're not sitting there solving like a gazillion wacky equations. It's just a very strange thing, counting by standard deviations. But if you've practiced it, if you know how to do it on test day, you can pick up a point on the hard section of the GRE and not even realize you just did anything hard. That's how far ahead you will be of the competition. Now, I got to give you a chance to practice on your own, so let's do it. This one's going to be a little bit tricky because we don't have a short answer poll, which is totally fine. Try this one on your own and write your answer on the computer. Moderators, please do not submit any answers in the chat if people give a final answer in the chat, not because we are mad that you got the right answer or put it in the chat, but just to keep the chat free of spoilers. And when 90 seconds are up, we're going to review it like there ain't nothing to it, and I'll show you exactly how to get this value question done on test day in less than 90 seconds. Good luck, and I'll see you in a minute and a half. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's review this question. We are told that the value of z in the standard normal distribution is negative 1.2, and it's at this point that many of your competitors' heads are going to completely, not even explode, just like roll off their necks and do a little wheelie in the GRE testing center before picking up the phone, dialing their parents, and asking if that futon is still in the basement so they can live in it for the rest of their lives. But you're not going to panic on test day. Because if you have no idea what this phrase means, you're going to be like, well, it's one of those dumb questions I definitely don't feel like answering, so I'm just going to skip it and move on. Calm, collected, confident, not going to worry about it. Just skip that question and move on. All right, no need for a panic. If you do know what to do, well, that's great, right? Just go ahead and do it then. There's no need to panic if you know how to do it. You just gotta do it. What this means is that if we draw our standard deviation number line, again, where 0 is the average, 1 is 1 standard deviation more than the average, -1 is 1 standard deviation less than the average, etc. Z is at the spot -1.2. In other words, it is 1.2 standard deviations below the average. Now, we are told that the median is 250. Ladies and gentlemen, tell me please in the chat, where should I put the number 250 in my number line? This is where the GRE is just like flexing its absolute most challenging muscles, because the test makers throw you the median here as a curveball. But cyber high five. All right, Maya's having none of it. Alicia's having none of it. Kimberly's like, I see through your tricks, GRE. It's just at 0, right? The median and the mean are the same, because when you have a normal distribution, AKA a perfectly symmetrical, beautiful curve, the median and the mean are the exact same thing. So the 250 is going to go straight in the middle. Okay, so we put a 250 there. Now, we are also told that the standard deviation itself is 1/10 of the mean. Okay, standard deviation is 1/10 of the mean. Folks, what is the value of the standard deviation of this list if it is 1/10 of the mean? Now, it so happens that finding tenths is really easy. If you want to find the tenth of something, you just lop off a 0 or move the decimal point in. So here we have a mean of 250. Remember, it's the same as the median. And 1/10 of that will be 25. So we figured out the standard deviation is 25. We figured out that the 250 needs to go right on the 0. So let's go ahead and drop that in. 250. Okay, Z is 1.2 standard deviations below 250. Well, folks, in this problem, what is 1.2 standard deviations? Believe it or not, to find that, all you have to do is take the standard deviation, which is 25, and multiply it by 1.2. That's all you have to do. You can even use your on-screen calculator for that. I love the calculator, by the way. I know a lot of math teachers don't like calculators. I'm like, no, calculators are amazing. So yeah, if you want to do it in your head, great. But if you want to use your calculator, totally fine. I see Brittany got it. Brian got it. Fantastic, Megan. Yep, a lot of you guys saw it. It is 30, because 25 times 1.2 is 30. So you take 30 away from the average. Make sure you go down. 250 minus 30 is 220. And that is the answer that you would type in, confirm, and then move on with the GRE. That is all you have to do. And it's crazy because the math on this problem is very simple. What was the math? The math was 250 divided by 10, 25 times 1.2, and 250 minus 30. That was the math. Yet it is a high 160s level question, because the test makers know that people are just going to completely have a panic meltdown from how the question is phrased. If the GRE had asked you, hey, what's a tenth of 250 times 1.2 subtracted from 250, like that would have been easy. But by putting in all this normal distribution verbiage, the test makers are trying to throw you off. This is why you should never be intimidated on the GRE. Even if you don't know how to solve a problem, I guarantee that you can solve it. You have the mental machinery to solve it. You are capable mentally of solving it. You might not be able to find the way to solve it, but you can do the math if you knew the path that you had to take. So dig deep and really trust in yourself. Say, okay, I can do this. I might not be able to figure out how to or what I should do, but I could do it. And if I have to skip it for now, I'm going to skip it, but that's not going to shake my confidence in my own awesomeness on this test. All right, folks, fantastic work. Let's do one more question for practice. If you'd be so kind, folks, please give this quantitative comparison a shot. And I will give a hint. There was that one thing that we talked about earlier that I said was going to come up in a practice problem, and it is coming up on this practice problem. So if you don't know how to do it, it's totally fine. Take a power nap for a minute and 30 seconds, come back, and get ready to learn something awesome. If you do know how to do it, great. Give it a shot. Vote in my friend Pollmaster Stewart's poll, and I'll see you in a minute and a half to review. Good luck. Enjoy the practice. All right, folks, great work on that question, whether you got it right or wrong. Great work on it. Thank you for giving it a shot. I saw some really awesome comments in the chat. I saw Brian saying, day was made. I would have freaked out for this question before now. Exactly. That's why we picked the session for this event. We wanted to show you that even for some of the absolute most challenging content on the GRE, there's often a way to get it done that's not even that bad. It's because the GRE wants to test your creative problem solving skills, not your sit down and do 500 crazy equations of math skills. That's not what grad schools are looking for, and that's not what the GRE is looking for. So a similar thing happens in this question, although you do need to know a little bit of stats knowledge. The good news is that you learn it once, you learn it for life, and it doesn't matter how hard it was to learn, because however hard it was, you have infinite time now, and on test day you'll know it. So we're told that Q is normally distributed with a mean of 35 and a standard deviation of 10. All right, let's go ahead and draw our number line, all right? And we've got, of course, counting by standard deviations here. We'll have, 0 in the middle, let's say. And then -1, -2 going left, 1, 2 going right. Tell me in the chat, folks, please, where should I put the number 35? Where is that number supposed to go on my number line of counting by standard deviations? Remember that the average in our number line of counting by standard deviations is always at 0. So that is where the 35 needs to go. It's going to go right there. Good. Okay, now we have some more numbers that we'll need to place. So we've got this other number, 25 in quantity A. Let me know in the chat, folks, where should I put the number 25? By the way, a lot of you get, so many of you guys are getting it. Brittany, Christian, Destiny, very nice work here. Olivia, Destiny again, Angelique, fantastic work, folks. It should go at the -1. And that's a bit mysterious. So if you're like, whoa, where are these space wizards and how'd they figure out it was -1? You have to use the fact that 10 is 1 standard deviation. That means that every step on this number line is not moving up or down by 1, but it's actually moving up or down by 10. That's how this number line works. Each step is 1 standard deviation, or 10. So 25, which is 10 less than 35, must be 1 standard deviation less than the average, so it'll be at -1. Okay, so we have to compare this to the 20th percentile value of Q. And admittedly, that is very difficult to do if you don't remember this weird fact that I showed you earlier, which I'll reiterate now. If you forgot, it's good. That's what this lesson is for, is to help information stick in your head. Remember that within 1 standard deviation, you're going to see about, not exactly, it's going to be a little more than that, but about 2/3 of all of the numbers. So when we write our percentiles, we can use this knowledge to make some approximations. Let me know in the chat, where would you reckon, all right, just logically, is the 50th percentile on our standard deviation number line, meaning half the numbers are below it and half the numbers are above it. This is one of those cases where if you've done your GRE prep and you know how the GRE is scored, it's like, hey, I know about percentiles from looking up how the GRE is scored with Coach Allie, because percentile means what percent of people did worse than me on this test. So here, exactly, it would be right at 0. So I'll make a quick note here that 0 is the 50th percentile. Let's move my little arrows down just a bit. And I'll make some room here for the 50th percentile. Now, if I know that there's 2/3 of the data within one standard deviation of the middle, it follows that there's 1/3 of the data to the left of it, between 0 and -1, and 1/3 of the data to the right of it, between 0 and 1. So let me know in the chat, folks, between 0 and -1, if that's where we're seeing 1/3 of the data, then roughly what percentile would you say that 25 is? Again, if 1/3 of the data is in that zone I just circled in orange, then roughly what percentile would you say that 25 is? Well, you're going to think about it like this. 33% is 1/3 of the data. We're subtracting it from 50, though. That's the trap, right? That was like the big trap. Like, oh, GRE, you got me good on that one, but never again. You're going to take 1/3 of the data, which is 33 percentiles, and subtract it from 50. And when you subtract 33 from 50, you end up with about 17, right? And I know that's going to be like, wait, Boris, didn't you say it was 1/3 of the data? Yes, 1/3 is within one standard deviation of the average on either side. If you lose 1/3 of the data and you were starting at 50, you'd end up at 17, because 50 minus 33 is about 17. Again, super tricky, but never, ever, ever be mad at yourself for doing hard work and practicing and getting your GRE score to go up. Never be mad at the GRE for having traps, because if the GRE has traps, you know what that means? It means that your competition's falling firm on test day and you're going to do better than your competition. Don't be mad at things that result in you getting a higher GRE score, because you want that. So a 25 is, roughly speaking, the 17th percentile, and quantity B, begging your pardon, folks. Go ahead and fix that one, shall we? Quantity B is the 20th percentile. Now, clearly the 20th percentile is going to be bigger than the 17th percentile. So we're going to end our hour-long session here, for me, my part of it anyway. And my personal favorite GRE answer choice of all time, choice B for Boris. Click that choice, confirm it, and move on with the test. Now, I saw a great question from Howard. Will you be my life coach? I would love to be your life coach, Howard. I think life coaching sounds like such a fun job. Alas, I already have a very fulfilling and wonderful career at Kaplan that I could not possibly give up. But it is amazing how much of test prep is psychological. When I began teaching for Kaplan in 2008, I thought my job was just going to be like, hey, you know, let me show you some math, kids. But it's like almost a secondary part of my job, I realize, is explaining these questions and showing math and stuff like that. Because what I found was the biggest problem is not that my students couldn't do it. Like, they could do all the math on day one, honestly. Maybe there's like a formula here and there they forgot, or they had to be reminded of, like, how do you find the mode or something like that. But they could do it all on day one. The reason that they weren't getting the score that they wanted was because they were held back psychologically. They thought they couldn't do it, so they convinced themselves they couldn't do it. And so then they would get intimidated during the test and panic, and then they would lose time panicking, and then they'd be rushed and get a bad score. All this stuff doesn't really come from not being able to do math or, quote, not being able to take tests. It just comes from the wrong perspective. And you can change that. You can change your perspective. You can say, hey, when I practice and I make a mistake, I'm going to celebrate it. I'm going to be like, yes, thank goodness I made that mistake, because it's helping me get a higher GRE score. When you take the test and a question like this appears on your screen, you're not going to be like, oh no, this must be beyond my meager capabilities. No, you're going to be like, well, I can do this. And if it turns out I can't, fine, I'll skip it. No problem. I'm not going to sweat it. You know, it's that attitude shift that really makes a big difference on the GRE. And I hope that you've taken that away from me. In addition, I hope, to some really hot advanced stats content. So thank you so much for your crazy work in this session. This is, a free event, and you've come here and you've done some of like the absolute hardest math that exists on the GRE. For that, we celebrate you. Thank you so much for coming and for giving us your time. And please don't go just yet, because that was the end of my hour of GRE channel session teaching, doing some advanced statistics. But Coach Allie is here, and she will guide you with her capable hands. So Allie, feel free to come aboard the camera at your leisure. And once you are up, I'm going to sign off and turn it over to you. Thank you guys again so much for all your hard work this past hour. Allie, you are in control.
Hi, hello again. It is me. Tell me, how did it go? I see a lot of thank yous, so I'm assuming it went really well. How did it go? I know advanced statistics can be good, it can be great, it can be difficult, it can be all of the things. But I do want to remind you too that until your score is above a 158, this is not a thing that you have to put a whole lot of time or effort into. There are so many other fish to fry or fish in the sea. I don't know. Why do I keep mixing metaphors with y'all? But you don't have to make it a huge part of your study right now, or even a big part. I mean, for the first section, I think mostly just knowing the definition of mean, median, mode, and range will be enough statistics for you. And then, yeah, when you're in section 2A, this stuff is going to start to come into play, but there will be a whole bunch of other advanced topics too. So even then, you don't have to hang your hat just on this. If you totally understood that, then great, because you will get more points when you get into section 2A. If you took it as a preview, then great, because when you get to this stuff and it's time to start really studying this kind of stuff, then you will have a great foundation already. I'm glad that y'all enjoyed it. So I did want to talk about two things. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is what Boris was just talking about, which is leaning into your mistakes. I feel like this is something that I learned from test prep that I actually apply in my actual life now. But he's right. If all you do is get right answers in my class or in your practice set, then you haven't actually learned anything that day. So it might feel great, but the next time that you take a quiz or a practice test or the real test, you're not going to have any extra points because you didn't find anything that you're bad at. I recently heard some quote, it was something like, an expert is just a person who has made every mistake possible in a given field. And I think that's exactly right. I've told you my journey, 141 to 167 quant. I made every mistake on that road. I had to really figure it out. But every time that I got a question wrong, it became less and less oh my gosh, I can't believe that wrong. But okay, great. What can I learn from this that I can employ on the next question? So if you can kind of change your mindset, then you can get a lot of points just from that. So I think that's really good too. Now I want to talk about, we appreciate you, Norma. Thanks for coming. I want to talk about what's called the 3-pass approach. So this is the way that I move through either a verbal or a quant section. Although I will say that in verbal, I do it a little differently than I do it in quant, but we could even call it the 4 and 5 pass approach for me. So I want to talk about it. So these are, you can see these buttons here. And we talked about this the other day. How much are y'all using these buttons to mark and review and move through your section, scale of 0 to 10? I know the other day, some of y'all were either all the way to 0 or all the way to 10. One of you said you were at 15. So that's quite something. I think actually now I might be at a 15 too, because I use these features religiously. So not a lot. We have 0s, 10, a whole lot. All right. Well, you want to move it as close to a 10 as you possibly can. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, ETS has done studies they have found that you're more likely to change from a wrong answer to a right answer. And so going back to check your work can be really important. And they found that the people who use the mark and review features actually score higher. So that's one of the things that you want to start to employ. The way that we, and here at Kaplan, and the way that I go through the section is with at least 3 passes. So on the first pass, I'm looking for any questions that look easy to me. So I'm not going to take the time to deeply read every question and all their answer choices. So sometimes I might think a question is easy to find out it's not so easy, or I might think a question is hard to find out it's not so hard. But pretty much you can tell looking at, you know, a 1 or 2 step geometry question that that's going to be easier than, you know, one of those statistics questions that Boris just put up. So on your first pass, you basically want to look for any of those easy questions or easy for you, kind of the lower hanging fruit. And what you want to do is just answer them as you come to them. So if question 1 looks easy, take it. If question 2, though, does not look easy, then you want to assess. If it is something that you feel like you know how to do, but it's going to take you more time, like, okay, oh, I think I know how to do that, but it's going to be all these steps, then you're going to mark it with a little check mark. All you have to do is just click the mark button, which I've highlighted in purple, and it will then put a mark on it. For the things that look really hard to you, you're going to skip entirely over those. And then what you'll have is a screen that looks like this when you go to your review button. So when you click review, what you're going to see is something just like this. Notice how some questions are answered. Those are the ones that you identified as being easy, so you just took them right away. The ones that say incomplete with a check mark, that means you didn't answer them, but you did put a check. So those are the ones that you've told yourself, I definitely know how to do these, but I think it's going to take me a little longer, so I'll come back for them later. In this way, you're doing the things that are quicker and easier first, and you're making sure that you don't get stuck on any kind of speed bump questions that then cause you to rush through the things that are easy for you. So basically, you're just taking back control of the section from the test maker and reorganizing it in a way that you're going from easier to harder, getting stuff knocked out of the way that's the easiest for you, quickest for you, saving time for those harder topics. So the ones that say incomplete with a check mark are those that you would go through on your second pass, because they're the ones that you said, hey, I definitely know how to answer that, but it's going to take me a long time, so I'm going to come back. When you answer any question, though, notice how one of these has answered with the check mark. If you answered any question and you were like, you know what, but if I had all the time in the world, I would come back to this, then you can add or leave a check mark there, and I'll tell you what to do with those later. So on the second pass, we're going to go for those that we marked that have the check mark and they say incomplete, because those are the ones you told yourself you know how to do. What do you think we're going to do next? We've got answered. We've now taken our incompletes that we marked with the check mark and answered those. Anything that we're not 100% confident, we have added a check mark. So those are answered with the check mark. What are we looking for next? Now it's time for those ones we skipped. We skipped them entirely. So on your review, it's going to say not answered. So notice how this one on number 14 and 16 says not answered. So those are the questions that we're going to go to next, because those are the ones that we said were going to be the most difficult for us, or maybe we looked at it real quick and weren't even sure how to answer it. So we will go to those on the third pass. So the third pass is anything that was not answered. So whatever's easy for you, anything that you know how to do, but you think it's going to take a long time, you put a check mark. Anything that looks hard, just skip it. Just skip it entirely. Then on your review, anything with a check mark that's incomplete, go to that second, because those are the things you told yourself to go to. Third pass, you're going to go for anything that was not answered. And then if you have time, if you've gotten to the point of efficiency that you still have time in your section, it's going to be boss level. And boss level, Kristen, is when we're going to go to the things that have been answered but still have a check mark, because those are the things you told yourself, you know what, if I had more time, I might rework this problem or just double check my work or whatever. So you're going to go back to them. And the goal at the end of any section is that it will look like this, that every single question is answered. Nothing is marked, nothing is left unanswered. That means that you've gone through it. You've answered everything that you can. You've answered everything that you thought you couldn't answer. You've double checked your work as best you can. This would be the goal for any section, is that you manage to get through it and get to the point where you are super satisfied with every single answer. So that is basically our 3-pass approach. And I will go back. So the first pass is anything that looks easy to you. And remember, you have to do this really quickly. This should not take a long time. You're not going to read it in advance. Or you're not going to read it in depth. So anything that just looks easy to you, like what's your easiest type of question? Like what type of question would you love for them to just fill the GRE quant section with? For me, it would be linear equations. So if I saw linear equations all day, I'd be like, yes. So anytime I see a linear equation question, I'm going to stop and just do it. I'm going to stop and just use it. Abby, great question. So Abby asked, when you use the review feature, can you click on the question and go directly to it? Yes, you can go directly to it. So you'd go directly to it, and then you could go back to the review and go directly to the next one. You don't have to use your arrows and go back and forth. So that's a great question. So yeah, Brian, if you see a geometry question, first of all, you're going to know if it's easy or hard really quick because you know geometry pretty well. So any of those questions that I see that I'm like, okay, I definitely know how to do this, super easy, it's like 1 or 2 steps, I'm going to stop and do those. Anything that I see that I'm like, oh, I know how to do that. Like, I don't love geometry, actually, speaking of geometry, and it would take me a little bit longer of a time. So if I see a geometry that I'm like, okay, I know how to do that, but I only know how to do it the long way, I would mark that with a check mark and move on. And then anything that looked really hard, like these statistics, no, Helen asked us, marking the question impact your score. It does not. It's just like leaving a breadcrumb trail for yourself of what you were thinking so that you don't have to use the back and next and go back there and try and figure out what you were thinking about on each one. You're just basically leaving notes for yourself on what you're thinking about the question and your confidence level in the answer that you do. So on that first pass, we're going to answer easy. We're going to mark the things that are essentially medium for us, and anything that look really hard, like some of them statistics questions we saw tonight, we're going to skip entirely. And of course, if you answer a question and you're like pretty confident, but you're like, you know what, if I had time, I'd redo that math, then you can add a check mark if you didn't have one, or you can leave the check mark up even after you've answered it. And then when you go to your review, it will look like this. Answered questions when you were super confident about it, you didn't ask yourself to go back. Incomplete with the check mark, those are your second pass questions. Those are the ones that you put the check mark that you said were medium, that you knew how to answer them, but it would take you a little bit longer. You're going to come for those second. The third pass, of course, you go for anything that's not answered. Those are the ones you skipped the first time because you were like, holy crud, those look really difficult. I'm just going to skip them. I'm going to go do them last, try and get at least some kind of answer in the book. And then boss level is to go back through, and anything that left with the check mark, because they should have been answered at this point. Anything with a check mark, we're going to go ahead and go back and redo our work if we have time for this boss level. You know, Kaden, so it is okay to leave a hard question blank at the beginning, but you do want to always guess. So another feature that you have too is you always have your clock here highlighted in red. So when you get down to about 3 minutes, and this is to your question as well, Brandon, when you get down to about 3 minutes, I would have you go back to your review, and anything that's unanswered, I would answer and put a check mark next to it. Answer and mark it. Guess and mark, guess and mark, guess and mark. And then if you have any of the 3 minutes left, then go to anything that's answered with mark and try and do it. But at least that way you don't run out of time and have things that are not answered. But the goal would be within enough time that you're having extra strategies will make you more efficient and you'll have more time to work, as will, just doing this is going to make you more efficient because you're going to be doing the questions that are easiest for you first. You're going to be banking time for those harder questions, and then they will come later. So even if you did run out of time on those are the ones you were least likely to get right anyway. And I will tell you that this is kind of difficult at first. One of the things, if you have our QBank or practice tests, you can start practicing it, but certainly in the QBank as well. I will sometimes make my tutoring students a quiz that has like just mixed difficulty. And the whole goal of the quiz is not even about answers. It's, can the student identify easy, medium, and difficult, and then take them in that order, because that's a really good and important skill to have. I have seen a student's score go up 6 quantitative points just by implementing this well and practicing it and doing it well, because all of a sudden she was getting back to, what was easiest for her and best for her, so that she never ended up rushing or missing those. And with her extra time, because this was not a student who always used up the whole time. This was a student who probably didn't spend enough time on their questions, so they always finished early. Now they're going back and they're reviewing their work, and they know where to go and where to target that extra time, because you never have extra time, right? You never have extra time on the GRE. So this will give you just a lot more guidance, and you're guiding yourself, but a lot more guidance in where you should be going, what you should be doing. Now, I said that I do it a little bit different for verbal. So for verbal, because there's so many words, I just find it not as easy to assess the difficulty level. So what I will do is just go to the question types, and I will do the question types in the order that are easiest to me. So the easiest for me are short verbal. So I'm going to go for those first. critical reasoning and reading comp will be last, just because it is longer. It just takes longer. So that's how I would do that. But I really encourage you to practice the 3-pass approach, because you will really find yourself moving more efficiently through a section, feeling a lot more confident, and being able to kind of keep track of your own thoughts so that you know where to spend your time and where is maybe not a valuable use of your time. If you don't know how to answer a question, you don't want to sit there spending 3 or 4 minutes like trying to answer something you know you can't answer. Skip it, leave it till the end. And when you get back there, if you have time to whittle away at it, do it. If you don't have time, then guess and move on, because you'll at least know that it was a question you were least likely to get right anyway. I'm glad that you're pumped. You should be. All of this stuff is like super helpful. And this 3-pass approach is something that I really, really, really enjoy. And I really think that it made a very big difference, especially in my quantitative. So I want you to really, really try this. And if you have a bank of questions and you can organize by difficulty, do it. Organize by difficulty and make it a drill for yourself, that it's not so much about answers that time, but it's about, did I accurately identify which ones were quickest and easiest, which one were a little bit slower and mediumist, and which one were the hardest, and I was able to skip those. So if you're able to accurately identify all of that, then you can move through a section in a much more efficient way by employing the 3-pass approach, which for me is kind of like a 4 and 5-pass approach, because I am definitely on boss level. So, I mean, not to like toot my own horn, but toot toot. All right, that's all I have for study tips today. I would love to answer your questions. I know we didn't get through all of the questions earlier. So what have we got? What have we got left? I'm going to skip to my favorite slide here. Oh, is that Boris? Nope, not Boris. We have Boris on another one. This is my favorite slide, like that. Don't take low for an answer. I just think that's a really cute thing to say. What have y'all got? Jennifer, I almost didn't come to this session because my quant is so low that I didn't think. Oh no, Jennifer, don't ever think that. Like I said, I went from 141 quantitative to 167 quantitative throughout my Kaplan course. And, you know, so that was the 8th percentile up to like, I don't know, like the 95th, 96th percentile. So there's never anything that is not going to help you. And it's never like, it's never too much. You can do, you can get as many points as you want. Of course, it, you know, took me a good bit of time to do that, but you definitely can. Let me see. So the marked question, Bob asks, so the marked questions, there's like a table of contents. Sorry, I missed some of the past. Yes, Bob. So there's a review button, and when you click review, it will take you to a list of all of the answers, and you'll be able to see which ones are not answered, which ones have a check mark and are not answered. Those will say incomplete with the check mark, and which ones are answered and which ones are answered with a check mark. So it's always, what can I answer first? What can I leave a check mark on? And what am I going to skip entirely? Because holy crud, that's a scary question. And then you're going to go back for the ones that you marked. Then you're going to go back for the ones that you skipped. And then if you have time for that boss level, anything that is answered, but you still have a check mark, those are the ones that you were like, if I had time, I would come back and redo this one. And so you'll spend any extra time that you have going back and doing that. And your goal at the end of the day would be to have all of them answered, no check marks left, and feel confident about all of your answers at the end of the section. Let me see. My top general tips for improving GRE scores in math. And this is actually my top tip for improving GRE scores generally. And I'm going to say it's to practice. And I know that sounds so silly because you're all like, but Coach Allie, of course we're going to practice. I actually am willing to bet that a lot of you are not planning to practice and you just don't realize it. So taking a quiz, a timed quiz, that's not practice. That's testing yourself. Taking a full length test, that's not practice. That's testing yourself. Going to a lesson, it's not practice. It's going to a lesson. It's instructional, right? You might have maybe a couple questions that you attempt, but that's not actual practice. The biggest issue that I find when students come to me and they've been studying on their own and now they're like, okay, I got to go to Kaplan. I got to get a coach. It's not working. When they get to me, the biggest issue, bar none, is that I will talk to them about what they've been doing, and they've been going to lessons and they've been reading chapters and they've been watching videos and they've been taking full length tests and they've been trying targeted quizzes. And I'm like, okay, but when did you practice? And it's like crickets. So my biggest tip to you is it's like, just get in the gym and shoot free throws until you're super good at it. get a bank of questions, have a lot of practice questions. If all you have is practice tests, then, break them down, organize them, but get in there and just do work. Like you just studied statistics. So get in there and do a bunch of statistics questions over and over and over. I love for my students too, to read the explanation after each and every question before moving on, because you don't want to do like 10 questions to find out you're making the same mistake every time. You want to learn from that and then be able to employ on the very next question. But I can't tell you how many students I've met who have spent way more time prepping than they should, or gotten way too little points for the amount of time they put in, because they have spent all these hours watching, listening, reading, testing, but never practicing. So that's my number one tip, really, for all students across all sections. And then also just specifically to GRE, just make sure that you have brushed up on all of your foundational math. So just make sure that that kind of high school level, the basic formulas, like area of a circle, area of a triangle, circumference, area of a solid. I don't know, I'm just doing all geometry. How to foil, how to reverse foil. So that kind of basic stuff, make sure that you remember how to do that. What happens if you run out of time before you hit submit? So Savannah, you will not run out of time, because when you get down to 3 minutes, I would like you to go to your review and target anything that does not yet have an answer on it, and just go and put your guess letter. You have a slightly higher chance of guessing correctly if you always guess the same letter. So just go back using the reviewed, anything that doesn't have an answer, put like C, leave a check mark on it. And then if you have any time in the 3 minutes left, then just pick anything and try and answer it without a guess. Just anything answered with a check mark, go back and rework it or work it for the first time. But do make sure that you watch the clock, because you don't want to leave anything unanswered. But it's always like that, right? Like you never want to run out of time without answering things. Doing the 3-pass approach doesn't take that away or make that worse. You always need to watch the clock. You always need to know when you're coming towards the end of a section. You always need to guess on anything you have not yet answered. The only difference with the 3-pass approach is that you would want to go to your review feature to know exactly which ones are unanswered. So it's not going to necessarily be the last 4 questions of the section. So that's the only difference. But I'm just keep your eye on the clock, like you should be doing anyway. Let's see what we have. Will the experimental section ever come first? Oh yeah, it could totally come first. It could come anywhere. So you have no idea where it's going to be. You will not be able to recognize it. So you just have to treat them all as if they're totally real and just work them as well as you can. I will tell you though, if your second section seems easier, do not necessarily get bummed out. So sometimes I've had students who are like, oh my gosh, my second section on the practice test was so much easier than my first section that I just totally freaked out, because I thought that I had bombed the first section. So I'm getting section 2C and it's like too late for me in my score. But really what had happened is that the first section was experimental. And so the second section was actually just, like a regular first section, which won't have naturally easier questions than the hardest second section. So her feeling that she had gone down in difficulty level was only because that first section was experimental. So even though you can't tell which one is experimental, if you go to your second of any given section and you feel like it's easier, don't just panic and be like, oh my gosh, I must have gotten lower second section. I must have gone into section 2C, because that's not necessarily so. So just keep your head straight, keep moving, keep working hard, and you'll be fine. But no, it could be first, and no, you will not be able to know which one it is. Is it important to go to boot camp before the GRE? Is it just an introduction class? My GRE is on Monday. Is it better to study and not waste time? It's up to you, Maria. I do think that the boot camp is kind of it's kind of a capstone lesson to everything that we've learned today. I don't think it's ever like a waste of your time, but if you're taking the test on Monday, I would feel a lot more comfortable with you just doing a bunch of practice problems still, just as many as you can get in, targeting those skills. Targeting all skills, I love for you to target strengths so that your strengths cannot be rusty on test day. So if you haven't looked at your strengths in a while, make sure you get practice on those. They cannot be rusty. And also on your weaknesses, but don't just study your weaknesses between now and Monday. But I don't think the boot camp is ever a waste of time. And it's also in the evening. So you probably shouldn't be like doing in-depth practice and study at that time anyway. So it might be just a good way to keep GRE in your day, but not be doing anything too intense. And you can do more of your intense practice earlier in the day. But I love the GRE bootcamp myself. And for any of you who can't come to the GRE bootcamp tomorrow, which I am not teaching, womp womp, I am teaching the one on next Tuesday. So if you don't get to the one tomorrow, then join me next Tuesday for the bootcamp. Oh, Joanna, I'm so glad you're feeling more confident. That's our whole job. Like literally, that's our job, is to make you more confident. See, we have a higher score guarantee. because we believe in you and we want you to be confident. What's the highest verbal boost you have seen? Well, I mean, I've seen students go up by, I've certainly seen students go up by 20 points or more, although it's rare, and that's for either section. It is rare because it takes a lot of work, and you really have to, I mean, you really have to do a lot of practice questions. You really have to lean into those mistakes. Like Boris was saying, like, you can't be afraid of making wrong answers. Like sometimes students will stop practicing because they got wrong answers and kind of feel down on yourself. You feel burnt out. You have to learn to lean into those wrong answers because burnout is real. And if you get to that where you're like, okay, I don't want to do any practice questions, I'm mad, I keep getting them wrong, then you're not going to get as many practice questions in as you would need to get like a huge jump like that, like 20 or more points. But if you can do a lot of practice and also get a lot of instruction, also ask a lot of questions, you certainly can have, I mean, you could go from anywhere to anywhere. Like I really feel, I mean, I kind of feel like that was my story. I went from the 8th percentile. I wasn't in verbal, but in my quant, I went from the 8th percentile to like the 95th, 96th percentile. So you can do anything, but will everybody? No, because it takes so much work and because it really does take humbling yourself and saying, I'm so glad I made that mistake. What can I learn from it? What can I employ next time? If you're able to do that, then I think really the sky's the limit on verbal or quant. Yes, in the immortal words of Allen Iverson, practice. Yeah, but you have to practice something new, right? If you're just practicing and doing it the same way you always did it, you're probably just ratcheting in bad behavior. Or even if it's a way to get the right answer, it has a max speed. So remember, we're always trying to learn and employ new strategies so that we have more than one in our back pocket so that we can be most efficient on test day saying, well, what is the best way to answer this question and going about it that way? Ariana, how long should you study for the GRE? You know, Ariana, it just depends on your starting score, where you want to end up, how many hours a day you have, how much practice items you have, how much help you plan to get along the way. It's just so many questions and variables. The average student will spend 120 to 150 prep hours, which is a lot. That's the average student. Some will spend less, some will spend more. And the average amount of time that they spread that out over is 3 to 3.5 months. However, I really encourage you to feel free to put in your personal information, and it will go straight to your tutor. Just like say, hey tutor, this is me, what do you think? Because it really is so unique to each person, but your tutor would be happy to advise you based on what they've seen and your own stuff. How many months or hours or weeks did you do on, you know, I don't know how many hours it was. I really don't know how many hours it was, but it was about 3 months. And I know that I did kind of work on it every day. I'm sure that I probably took one day off in the week or something, but I did kind of work on it every single day. But I will tell you that I was also in law school at the time. Yeah, I was in law school. So it must have been like 5 years ago, but I was in law school at the time. So I know it was not like 8-9 hours a day because I was in law school. So I didn't have 8-9 hours a day. So it was about 3 months, and I'm sure it was like at least a couple hours on every day, but I would never hold myself to like, oh, I had to do 3 hours. I really think quality is better than quantity, but you really have to understand what is quality prep. And that's not always quizzing yourself and timing yourself and watching a video and reading and going to a lesson. You have to learn something instructional and then practice it and later quiz it. You have to have all three or you're not going to get the score you want. But yeah, I mean, I don't think I can't tell you how many hours, but it was about 3 months. And I'm sure that I did it almost every day. I don't know how much on every day, but I would say probably at least an hour. Right. The experimental section can definitely be either quant or verbal. Do you have a recommendation on how many hours to study at a time or day if your schedule is open? You stay at home mom. Oh, that's awesome. And your kiddo is in school during the day. You know, as much as you can. I feel like actually people who have their time open sometimes tend to be on the extremes. Like your time is so open that you maybe don't study as much as you could or you need to because you're like, oh, I have time. And then it just ends up that you don't get to it, like procrastination. Or you're like, oh, I have time, so I'm going to sit here for 8 hours. But 8 hours is not a quality 8 hours. Remember I said quality over quantity. So I would do it as much as you can, but feel free to take liberal breaks, and you will know when you need a break when you start rereading stuff. If you have to start not just rereading because it was complicated, but like rereading because you didn't even hear it, like in your head, you're like, you're so tired that you're like, wait, what did I just read? I have no idea. Not that it was confusing, but you just did not hold on to it. That's a good sign that you should take a break. I'm a big fan of liberal breaks. I don't know how people sit for like 5 hours and study. I will work like 2 hours and then take 2 hours. I'm a big break person, but just don't end up being on the extremes with your day, and make sure that you do touch it regularly, like every day, or maybe take one day off a week, but make sure you do at least a little bit of something every day and as much as you can, but do it realistically. So 8-9 hours straight is not at all realistic. Allie, what Kaplan resources did you use to get your quant score? Well, that's a great question. So I was a Kaplan Plus student, a Live Online Plus student. When I studied for the LSAT, I was in person, but it's only because Kaplan didn't have live online classes then. And when I studied for the GRE, I was in law school, so I needed it to be online because I didn't have time to do GRE and also commute to GRE in the city of Atlanta, which if any of you live or have been to Atlanta will know that the commute is horrendous. The reason that I went with the live online obviously was because I was in law school and I didn't have time to drive anywhere, and I didn't want to anyway. And the reason I chose the Plus course is because our Plus course comes with coaching, which I felt like I would need because I really wanted to go up to such a high score, but I didn't know what it was going to take me or how to get there or really anything about math at all. So that was very helpful to me. But the biggest part of our Plus class, which you can also get individually on its own, but the biggest thing that made me get that class over a regular Kaplan class is that it comes with something called Math Foundations. It also comes with something called Advanced Math, but it comes with our Math Foundations, which is like it reteaches math as if you had never had it. And since I had never had math, having it retaught from the beginning. So it's not just like we're working GRE questions and we're saying, it's like we take it all the way back. Like we teach you how to FOIL, we teach you how to do a linear equation. So those types of things. So for me, or if you're just feeling like you're rusty, it's been a while, that foundational was really helpful. Like I said, it comes with a Plus course where you can get it on its own. And then it also has the advanced. So at a certain point, I needed those advanced topics. And so we also have a standalone that's a part of the Plus class, or it can be got on its own, called Advanced Math. So for anyone above a 158 who only needs to push that quant score up, this is a great resource because it's really very affordable if you get it on its own. And it only covers the really difficult stuff that you're going to see once you're above that 158 quant. But for me, I kind of needed all of it because I had to go from a 141 to a 167. So I kind of needed all of the help I could get, or at least I felt like I did. So that's what I used. But the reasons why I used it were some of those kind of features that you could also get as a standalone. Bob, that's inspiring. Oh, yeah, it really is about quality versus quantity. So if but you really have to, a lot of us have to really change the way that we study, because most of us are probably not used to studying in a way that is about doing something. You can't learn how to do something by watching, listening, or reading. You can only learn how to do something, or testing. You can only learn how to do something by doing it. But a lot of our educational career has probably been, we go to class, we read, we go to class, we read, we take a test. And we've done very well that way. A lot of us will have very good grades. We've been very successful, but that's because the doing part you learned a long time ago. You know how to write a paper, right? You know how to make your flashcards or whatever. These are not skills that you need to learn how to do for college because you already had them. So in college, you can be successful by watching, listening, reading, and then testing. Can't hear, because here you need to learn how to do something. And so you need watching, listen, reading, doing, and then testing. But yeah, it's definitely quality. Is the QBank organized by topic, subject, or just question type? So, okay, I understand your question now. So you can organize it by, have you seen the question before? So you can do all questions, or only unused questions, or only questions that I've marked previously that I would like to redo. You can do it by instruction type. So you can do quiz mode or timed mode, where it times you like the real GRE. But it has no explanations. You can do untimed, where it also has no explanations, but there's no time. So you can take as much time, but there's no kind of help along the way. Or you can do explanations, which is called tutor mode. And then, so you can read an explanation after each question, and it's also untimed. That's actually my favorite way. So that's my way where I have my tutoring students spend the vast amount of their practice time, because if you get a bunch of questions of a certain type and you read the explanation after one, you take away that information. Now you can apply it on the second question. You read that next question, you can apply whatever you learned there on the third question. So that's one of my favorite features. Then you can organize, yes, by subject type, and then you can also organize by specific question inside of there. So if you want to do all quant and just get a mix of quant questions, great. If you want to do just algebra inside of quant and get a mix, sure. If you only want to do algebra quant comparison, fine. So you can really kind of dig deep into what it is you're looking for. And then it also has by difficulty level. So if you only want to look at easy, and you want to only look at medium, you want to only look at high, or if you want to mix it. So the QBank really has everything. I don't think that most people can get a super significant just by using the QBank, unless you're a really, really good self-learner. I am not. I can't learn anything by reading. I will tell you, my bosses probably hate me because they will send me these long, detailed emails with all of these instructions, and my colleagues too, because even tonight, I didn't know the link to get into the chat with y'all. And I know for a fact that my boss sent an email that was very long that had all the links and all the instructions, and I can't learn that way. So for me, the QBank would never have been enough, because I got to be like, just like I was today with my fellow teachers, where I was like, oh, can I just get that link? And they like have to give it to me every time, because if I can talk to you, I'm good. But if I read it, I'm not. But yeah, it's my favorite resource of all of our resources, is definitely the QBank. Brian, best way to get something done is to give it to probably. Jennifer, oh, awesome, Jennifer. Yeah, and just you know when you're slacking. Everybody knows when they're slacking. Like you can feel it. Oh, Amanda, awesome. You got the QBank. So Amanda got the QBank. She's loving it. Amanda, do tutor mode, read the explanation after each one. Try and make really specific question sets to begin with. Once you are really good in tutor mode at like algebra problem solving, and you've been able to kind of go up difficulty levels and you're still doing really good, maybe then add timing. But make sure that you can really do it untimed. Make sure you're utilizing the explanations, and then move up. I don't have my tutoring students mix question types until they've studied each individual and are very good at doing them individually. And then we might mix question types, because that's a different skill that you're testing, because you're testing, okay, can I go from algebra to geometry and back again? And now I'm arithmetic, and now I'm number properties. Can you switch like that? And still, because some people, if you switch like that, it's like your mind gets all thrown off and you're like, wait. So if you mix question types at first, and also you're trying different difficulty levels, and also you're doing time, when you miss it, you don't know if it was timing that made you miss it, if it was the question type itself, or if it was the fact that you had to switch really quick between question types. You have no way. So I really like to isolate the variables. So you might try that in your QBank as well, because that is exactly what I would tell my tutoring students to do. Joanna, the QBank. Oh, Teacher Stewart linked it. Yeah, it's right there. And my favorite thing on that page that he linked is actually, I think it's our practice packs, because it comes with the QBank, and it also comes with the full GRE flashcards, and it comes with practice tests too. So additional practice tests. So, I mean, if you're going to get the QBank, I think you might as well just get that, because actually as a whole package, I think that that's the best bang for your buck resource. The QBank, Joseph, is Kaplan's set of just GRE questions. It has over 2,500 GRE questions that you can organize by, like I said, type, difficulty. Do you want to be electronically tutored as you go? It even has a help button. You can reach out to a team of Kaplan teachers to get help as you're doing it. It's just like a really awesome resource. It comes with all of our classes as one of the resources, but you can also get it on its own. Oh, I wish you had done it a month ago too, Amanda, but you got time now. You can do it. Oh, I love it, Amanda. And just, to read the explanation, even when you get something right. I mean, not all the time. If you know for sure you did it in the most efficient way and you totally got it right, that's fine. But if you get an answer right, but it was kind of slow or cumbersome for you, also read the explanation and see, because there's always a strategy tip as well as the explanation at the bottom. There's always a strategy tip. Just make sure that you saw all the same things and went about it in the most efficient way, because even right answer questions are ones that you can learn from. Another question about verbal. When you do reading What do you recommend to write down on your piece of paper to help you answer questions faster? Oh, that's a great question, Bob. So I like to think of reading comp as a game of Where's Waldo? So the question is something that you should look up. I don't think you should ever answer by memory. But in terms of what notes I take when I'm reading, I keep it fairly simple. I'm going to note what is the topic of each paragraph of the written portion. If there's a proper noun, I'll take a note of that. I will also notate any examples that are used. So if they're talking about, I don't know, the mating pattern of emus, and they're like, for example, the Northwestern American emu will do this certain dance, I would like mark that, okay, example, Northeastern, whatever. So those are pretty much the only 3 things that I would write down. But that's only because I'm never answering by memory. I'm going to take the question and I'm going to go back, but I'll at least know the kind of things that they might ask about. I'll know which paragraph I need to go to based on the topic of the question, because I've noted the topic of each paragraph. Or if they're asking about a certain example, if they give an example, a lot of times they'll ask a question. And if they give a proper noun, a lot of times they'll ask a question about that. What is the boot camp? Is it a class or questions and answers feedback? It's a class. Well, we go over some of the most difficult questions they can throw at you. And we're going to do some verbal and we're going to do some quant. We always have some amount of question and answer in every Kaplan event, but it's mostly questions and they are pretty hard. But everything that you've learned this week, you can employ in the boot camp. So I really like it as a capstone lesson to the free week, because you're a lot more prepared to go into the boot camp than if you just randomly stumbled upon Kaplan, had never studied, and then went to the boot camp. But even though it's hard questions, our goal in the boot camp is to show you how even the most difficult questions can be broken down into much simpler questions. And that's what we'll be doing at the boot camp. Yes, Brian, the answer to reading comp is always given in the passage because otherwise it'd be really unfair. Candy, are the practice tests offered in the package different from the free practice tests offered? Yes. So these are 2 additional tests. They're not, neither of them are a repeat of the one that is offered free. So that would be, if you got that, it would be a total of 3 different practice tests. What is the difference between coaching and tutoring in your course packages? You know, for some people, there's no difference. So when you work with your coach is also a tutor. And some students really choose to use their coaching hours in that way. And some students really need to. I think that I tend to do a lot more just coaching during coaching hours because I think it's really important. But I always start, like our first session, I always start with, these are the resources that I think you should use the most. But I would always start with that as a tutor as well. And then the thing that makes coaching different, although I mean, I guess I would do this as a tutor as well, is that I do spend a bulk of the coaching time going back over practice tests or like telling you what I saw when I went over your practice test and how to fix that. And I can see what homework you did. I can see what homework you didn't do. I can see how many question-based questions you're doing. I can see what lessons you're going to. And so I'm going to use all that information to kind of advise you on, you know, what you need to change in your study habits in order to get more points. But also, if you're struggling with a certain question type, we'll just do tutoring on that too. So you can always ask for that as well. But the big thing about coaching, I think, or the thing that makes it really stand out and make it really special is that it is like a constant person watching over your back and making sure, and also keeping you accountable, because I think those of you who now know me will know that I will definitely call a student out if they're not in their Q bank and doing their practice. Like that's going to be the very first thing that I say to you. And in fact, I have that conversation over and over and over again. But you know, it's not a huge difference between coaching and tutoring except for that. But I would also do that for my tutoring students as well. It's just that coaching is a lot less time than tutoring. Tutoring has a lot more hours in it. So it's probably a bigger proportion of the time is spent on the study planning, because that's something that in a smaller amount of time, you can get a lot more bang for it, right? Out of the points that you're getting. Yeah, they are obscure, but that's the thing, Bob, is that I don't want you to try and understand the passage too much. I just want you to read it, kind of get a general idea. I tell you what, I come out of passages all the time with very little idea of what they're talking about, but I will always go back. So for me, I don't wait it at the front end because they are obscure and they are difficult a lot of times. And they're on topics that are either boring or just totally foreign to me. So I'm not going to wait my time towards the front end and trying to understand these things really in depth, because that's not going to work for me. So I put less time up there, more time on the question and the research. So if the question asks me about a certain thing, then I go back. It's only going to go to like one sentence. And so now it's like one sentence or maybe one out of 2 or 3 that I really have to understand. And that's a little bit more manageable for me. So research is key, but that's my time. We actually went a little bit over time. I'm not here tomorrow. I'm going to miss you. You're going to have a boot camp without me. I'm going to be really sad about it. But if you are taking practice tests, if you have not yet taken our free practice test, join me this weekend for our free practice test. Get that done, get it under your belt. And then, of course, if you can't go to the boot camp tomorrow, we're doing the boot camp again on next Tuesday. And this time it'll be Coach Allie's boot camp, which are the same questions. So you don't need to come to both. But it will be in my super special Coach Allie kind of way. So I look forward to seeing them. And I just want to always thank y'all so much for coming. I always talk about how I went to law school, and the interesting thing about that is that I had to sit my family down and explain to them that I didn't actually want to be an attorney, but that I wanted to be a teacher and coach for the rest of my life. And that was a very awkward conversation, as you can probably imagine. But what that means at the end of the day is that I love my job, and all of us here at Kaplan, we love our job. There's a reason that we're doing this and that we're not, lawyers or, titans of industry or whatever else it is we could be doing with our time. And it's because of you, the students. And we don't get to do that unless you invite us in to your homes through your computers or into your prep journey. So I always like to end with a thank you that I honestly do mean. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your journey. And I look forward to seeing you in the future, unless you're taking your test and I won't see you again, in which case, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I hope I never see you again. To get it? I know it sounds mean, but think about it. I hope I never see you again. Bye, guys.